Well, it's that time of year again where YouTubers across the world are taking time off of work, sitting down by the fire, getting cozy, and making a year in review video. So I figured I would do the same. And you know, a lot's happened this year, so it seems kind of appropriate.
Safe build stuff!
I started out this year broken, or actually recovering from being broken. In December of last year, I was in a really bad bicycle accident and had 5 broken ribs and a broken collarbone. I used that time to work on my first project of the year, which was the 12.5-inch 3D printed carbon fiber Dobsonian telescope. Most of the work while I was, not able to do much was just running the printer, so that worked out pretty well. But there was some CAD work also that I had to do. I got that put together, and that has been one of my favorite, if not like the favorite thing that I've ever built. Or at least it's kind of brought me the most joy of things that I've built. So that was a really good time investment, really fun project, and I continue to use it just last night. In the middle of printing parts for that telescope project, I discovered I had some problems with my Voron V0 3D printer that I built years ago. I've got a few videos about that. There was various issues, so I figured that was a good excuse to tear it down and upgrade and rebuild it into the V0.2 variant, which has a number of modifications and upgrades. Well, that project kind of ballooned into being a significantly more complex and tedious task than I imagined. However, it worked out and I ended up with a much better printer. Now I'm really happy with my Voron V0.2 little 3D printer. It's very capable, much more reliable than it was, and looks cooler, and there's RGB lights in there, so that's awesome. On March 8th, I had my first proper dark sky observing session with my new 12.5-inch telescope out in Panamint Valley, California. Pretty much the middle of nowhere desert, and it's just kind of not a very lovely place during the day. It's just kind of boring, plain, flat desert. I mean, the desert's great, don't get me wrong, I love the desert, but the night sky there is very dark. That's your Bortle, 1 type of space. It is really lovely skies, so I had a really great night. That was the time of year where they do the Messier Marathon, where it's possible to see all 101, I think, 102 Messier objects in one night. I didn't stay up all night to do that, but I got many of them. And that was the night where I really kind of taught myself star hopping. The motors and GO2 system on my telescope were not quite working yet at the time. And so I just turned them off and pushed the telescope around manually, which was a feature that I really wanted from the beginning because, sometimes electronics fail you. And it would suck to be, to travel all that way to a dark sky site and set everything up and then be totally screwed for the night. So it was fine just turn the computer off and just enjoy manually pushing the telescope around. And I was able to find every object that I was looking for, which was pretty great, with a lot of help from the tablet computer and the app Stellarium. But I was able to push the telescope around and find everything I wanted to see. That was a good, sort of astronomy learning experience for me, and exposing me to manually looking for objects and finding a lot of really cool stuff in the night sky. And my experience with upgrading the Voron V0.2 got me using the latest versions of Clipper and some of the advanced features with that. And that got me really wanting another printer. So I ended up with the Trudon 2.0, which is sort of like the Voron 2.4 that you don't have to build yourself, that comes mostly pre-built. That printer has been my favorite printer to use. I made some mods and upgrades, mainly the RGB lights on the inside, which I have some files you can download and print those yourself if you want to add them. I also changed the hot end to match the hot end in my V0.2, so I have the same hardware in both printers. And I've done quite a bit of printing on that printer now, and I can definitely say that that's my favorite printer that I've used. I definitely love the Clipper firmware. Setting it up and configuring it, can be kind of a nerd nightmare, kind of a rabbit hole. But once you get things up and running and working, it's really terrific. And the fact that everything's open source and customizable, you really get to build the printer that you want, your printer, and that's what this is. Without having to build it from scratch like a Voron. So I really am happy with the Trudon 2.0. Really great printer, and can definitely recommend it to somebody who's kind of more of an advanced computer or hardware or hacker kind of guy. If you're looking for just plug in and start printing, it's probably not the printer for you. But if you like tweaking and modding and upgrading and customizing, then it's a great place to start. And good price, all that stuff. So definitely can recommend the Trudon. Very happy with that printer. Then I designed the Davely mount, which is a telescope mount, an alt-as telescope mount. It's relatively simple and inexpensive that you can 3D print and build yourself for use with the popular Hadley telescope. That project has got a bit of traction. It's been fun to see people build their own version of the Davely mount. And there's been a few upgrades and tweaks from the community on that as well. That was a fun project, a good challenge, and something that could definitely use some more attention. So maybe that will be a 2025 project to work on like a Davely mount V2. There's been some requested mods and changes from the community, changing some of the hardware to be more in line with the sort of hardware language of the stock Hadley telescope. And so that's something that I may work on in the future. But it was fun to do initially, a good challenge, and it's definitely a good starting point for a platform that could be much better. There's also the idea of adding motors to it to drive it around. You could put an on-step controller on it and run it like that. So yeah, we may look at that maybe early next year. May 11th last year, I went up to Mount Pinos for an astronomy session. Mount Pinos is the closer site. It's not the best site, but it is the best close site to me. It's pretty nice. It's pretty cool up there. I like it. It's definitely not the best, but it is very cool. It's easy to get to. It's not too far. Went up there on May 11th, and I remember seeing earlier that day that Instagram posts of pictures in Europe of the Aurora, these amazing Aurora event that we had. Really pink, colorful skies all over Europe. And I remember thinking wow, that's, Europe's not too much farther north than, Southern California, maybe here. And then it's no, come on, there's no way you get the northern lights in Southern California, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So I get up there and I met my friend Dan Watt up there. And Dan, first thing he said to me was, there's a chance we might see some Aurora up here tonight. And I'm like, no, come on, get out of here. And he's like, yeah, he had reports of people in Alabama seeing Aurora. And then it's oh, well, okay. And as it got dark, sure enough, there was this just very gradual magenta hue to the sky. It's just this tone. And if you didn't really know, what you were looking for or what you were looking at, you might not even notice that it was a thing. And throughout the night, it would get a little bit, it would kind of fade in and out a little bit. So to the naked eye, it didn't really seem like too much. But then you turn a camera on it, and then the color just blows up in the camera with even a basic camera and, relatively short exposure. So that was really cool and very special, and gotta be super rare to see in Southern California. At most, it's probably going to be once every 10 or 11 years, right? With the solar maximum. The solar cycle is like an 11-year cycle, I think. So at most, it would be every decade. So, and it's every decade if you get this, amazing event. So to be able to be there and witness that was pretty special. I'm still riding my 3D printed bike. A lot of people ask me about that, like, hey, how's this holding up? You know, is it still a thing? And like, yep, it's still a thing. I don't ride it, you know, probably as much as I should or as I would like to. Maybe I'll take it out this afternoon. But it's still just a great, you know, little casual, just hop on commuter bike. You know, maybe I'll ride it around the block and go get a donut from the donut shop or something like that. I started imaging the planets with my Dobsonian telescope. In the fall, all the planets started to, we started getting the planets in a good spot in the night sky at a reasonable time, starting with Saturn. Saturn, of course, is beautiful to see in the telescope, although now it's a little bit, you know, because the rings are getting really edge on, it's a little less spectacular to see and to image. There's kind of less detail. But it's still very interesting and neat to see the change in the angle of those rings. When I was previously imaging planets back around 8 years ago or so, the rings were very, you know, very angled to us. So we could see a lot of detail in the rings, and now we see them, you know, very edge on. And at some point next year, they're gonna disappear, they're gonna vanish from our view altogether as they become completely edge on, and then we'll reemerge in the opposite orientation. So being able to observe things sort of changing throughout the night sky is pretty cool. Then, of course, imaging Jupiter. Jupiter is probably my favorite object to observe. There's just so much detail that you can see, even from the light pollution. You know, very bright. You don't need dark skies for it. You just need really good seeing. And even just last night, I was outside with the telescope, and it was kind of a crappy night. It was clear. I guess the seeing was pretty good, but it was really hazy. But even through the haze, I could see the Great Red Spot and, you know, details. There's those that like wake turbulence behind the Great Red Spot. I was able to, you know, see that like from my balcony. That's so cool. And then, of course, imaging the planets made me realize the need or the desire for a remote focuser. So that led me to the electronic remote focuser project. That was a very cool, fun, challenging, turned out to be more challenging than I anticipated project. Working with these like small little parts. It's a little bit ambitious, the part design for FDM 3D printing, like a resin or you know, SLS parts, laser parts would probably be better, but I was able to make it work after a few iterations. I think I did 2 or 3 iterations on some of the parts. And so in the end, it was worth the effort because now I've got this electronic remote focuser that works really great. It's a cool little package. It's, you know, it's what I need. And now that I had a remote focuser and a camera, it was time to take on the deep sky astrophotography by converting my harmonic drive mount that I designed and built, well, finished around this time last year, converting that to an equatorial mount so I could do long exposure imaging with it. I was able to find a wedge online, and I bought that and then did all the work to reconfigure the mount into an equatorial mode and started imaging from my balcony. And after some tweaks and upgrades, I was able to turn that into a really capable little astrophotography deep sky rig package that I'm quite satisfied with. Mostly, I'd say like I'm super blown away with Nina. The software is so good, and that wasn't a thing when I was doing deep sky astrophotography like 8 years ago. So that industry has changed quite a lot. It's really cool to see, and you know, the software and hardware tools that are available now are just so much better than you know, in previous when I was doing that stuff. So that's really cool to see. And then the processing software is so much better. I've been going back and processing old photos with these new tools like Blur Exterminator and Star Exterminator, and it's just like it's just so much easier and more fun and cool and quick, and you know, to work on these images and you get way better results. So kind of getting to revisit old data is like 2 in 1, right? I've got new data, I've got old data. So I've been spending a lot of time in PixInsight lately. So that's been a lot of fun. And then finally, at the end of the year, I've gotten around to working on and finishing the upgrades to what I'm calling the V2 of the 12.5-inch Dobsonian telescope, or at least version 2 of the altitude axis gear mechanism. I completely redesigned that to be just mechanically more better. There was some issues. I was able to tweak it, and it worked fine. It worked good through a lot of tweaking and tuning. But I'm always not satisfied with poor mechanical designs, and it's like, okay, this should be much better. And so I've redesigned it to a version 2. It's better. So that's a video that's going to come. At this point, the video might be the first video of 2025. So that, I guess you'll have that to look forward to. I think that's about it. I think that's my Dave Build Stuff 2025 summary. I think it was pretty productive this year. I put a lot of videos up. The channel has seen some growth. I really appreciate everybody being here. All the likes and comments and subscriptions. It means a lot to me to have people watch my videos and are interested in the projects that I do. I think I tend to do things that are pretty niche, and so I don't expect a very wide mainstream audience from this stuff. So, but every view is cool to see that somebody will take the time to take a look and be interested in the stuff that I'm doing. I think it's cool, and I'm interested in it, and sharing it. It's clear that there's at least a couple of people out there that agree. So thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to 2025 doing more projects. Probably will be on astronomy for at least a little bit longer. I really want to explore, I mentioned before, upgrades to the Davely mount, like a version 2 of that, and or maybe even a motorized version. That could be something, definitely those will be fun projects to work on. Also, I really want to explore kind of the limits of what my astrophotography rig is capable of. Right now I've been imaging kind of like, not really wide field, kind of a modest field. I would really like to try to push the focal length and the mass to something, and that might work out great timing wise. The spring is galaxy season, as they say, as galaxies, there's more galaxies in the night sky to view, and those tend to be smaller and oftentimes more challenging targets than these big bright emission nebulae that are in our galaxy. So a longer focal length telescope will be necessary for that. So we'll see about that. Either buy a telescope, but of course it's Dave Build Stuff, so it's like, okay, well, now I have to build another telescope, So that maybe that's something I'll have to do. And if that's the case, I need to get started on that pretty soon, because if I want it available for the spring, I need to be working on it now, right? So I don't know. Anyways, now I'm just kind of rambling. Thanks again, guys, for being here. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. I appreciate you, and I will probably see you next year.